Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
We compare people to each other's or traumas to each other, and we shouldn't do that because the way you experience something, the way you feel something is totally different from the way I experience something. So we need to hold space for others, even if they're going to the top shelf and calling it something, but helping them unpack it. But then we also need to give them the opportunity to execute what they've learned through the process and understanding that to be resilient, it is a variety of things to do to help you through. So it could be going to school. It could be exercising. It could be medication. It could be counseling. It could be sitting out and staring at the window opposed to just saying, get over it already. Get over it already. We don't understand the impact that something is going to have on someone, that the impact on you may be totally different. So let's not compare how you got through something to how someone else may get through something. So grief may take time. Overcoming adversity from passing a test may take time. So we got to understand that everyone is not the same. And it doesn't mean that you're not resilient because you took a nap or you just need to rest. That's a part of being resilient, figuring out what you need and doing that.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. I'm your host, Billy Lahr, an educator, personal trainer, meditation teacher, and overthinker who talks to experts who specialize in social and emotional learning, communication, relationships, dating, parenting, finances, and inclusion, diversity, and equity, all in an effort to help us better reflect, learn, and grow so we can live a more purpose-filled life. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with me through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Our guest today is Dr. Shree Walker. Dr. Walker is the founder of Resilient Walker. She formerly served as Director of Special Education and Special Education Local Plan Area in Los Angeles County and as the Director of Section 504 and Special Populations for Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools in Nashville, Tennessee. She also served as adjunct professor at Belmont University and serves on the leadership committee for the Sexual Assault Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Walker received a doctorate of curriculum and instruction from Tennessee State University, an education specialist of administration and supervision from Tennessee State University, a master of special education from Lipscomb University, and a Bachelor of Arts in History from Fisk University. If you're keeping score at home, that's 4 degrees right there, ladies and gentlemen. We are in educated, good company right here. Dr. Walker participated in a public education leadership project with Harvard University and published her first book, Resilient Walker, in 2018, which you can access in the show notes or by visiting www.resilientwalker.com. She is here today to talk about the role resilience plays in navigating the complexities and possibilities life throws our way. So welcome to the show, Dr. Shree Walker.
Hello.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You have quite the pedigree here, Dr. Walker. So we're kind of I'm very fascinated by all these accomplishments. And so I think it's best that we just dive right into your 10 roles in your life. So what are the 10 roles that you play in your life?
I'm a lot of things. So narrowing down to 10 was a little hard, but I'll give it a try. I'm an author, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a learner, a servant leader, motivational speaker, and a connector.
Excellent. And when we talked, you put forever learner, and I like that you put that adjective right in front of there. What do you mean by forever learner?
We are forever learners. Every day, every hour, we are receiving information and learning new information, especially with this new wave of technology. So I am forever learning new things about myself, others, education, my field. So I will forever be a learner.
When you talk to people who appear to be in a fixed mindset, what frustrations come up for you when you have those conversations, or are you constantly trying to shift their mindset from fixed to growth?
So I make sure that when I encounter people, I truly understand that we impress upon the subconscious mind of every person we encounter in a positive way or in a negative way. And so when I'm working with educators or practitioners or even students and they have this fixed mindset, I explain that change starts with me, which is a mindset shift, education, evaluation, and execution. Oftentimes, I allow them to experience the learning by themselves. So the experience is where they can intrinsically process the information, because people don't like for you to lecture to them. People don't like you to tell them you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. You have to take them on a journey and allow them to discover themselves and see the areas of their shortcomings, for a better, lack of better words. And that will give them the opportunity to say, you know what, let me shift my perspective, let me shift my mindset and take it in small chunks for some people, because most people don't want to change forcibly. So it's a combination of giving people permission to feel the space, understand their own shortcomings and how they need to grow, and allowing them to do that at their own pace.
You do a lot of work with trauma. Do you find that people who have experienced trauma really struggle with that kind of reflective practice because it either takes them back to the trauma, they don't want to relive the trauma, or they've kind of let the trauma define them in a way where they don't want to make the change? Do you see that at all?
I think it's a combination of all those different things, depending on who you're actually talking to, their age, the work, and then where they are in the healing process. So oftentimes, most people are either stuck with, I don't want to, or projecting, I did this, you should be able to do blah, blah, blah. Why are you, worrying about that? So you become dismissive in someone else's growth, or you minimize someone else's response to an adverse childhood experience or an adult adverse experience. And so you have to be mindful of your own self-growth. And it takes someone who is constantly self-examining to know, you know what? I was projecting, I'm in this space, consider these things. So that goes back to being that forever learner as someone who is experiencing trauma, who is a leader, a principal, a teacher, a parent, being able to identify how you're encountering that person, leading that other person when you too are forever evolving, because oftentimes we can get it wrong and negatively impact someone's subconscious.
Well, and you put forever learner down as one of the 3 roles that you're most looking forward to in the second half of life. And you kind of touched on this idea of servant leader as well, as you're helping people reflect and you're helping people shift from fixed mindset to growth mindset. What is it about being a servant leader that you are looking forward to in the second half of life?
In the words of Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but never forget how you made them feel. And as an educator, as a human being, we have to remember we are here to serve others in various, capacities. And when you are a leader, a principal, a teacher, a parent, a father, whatever capacity, you have to serve the people you are leading. And with doing that, it's doing things you don't want to do. It's apologizing when you don't want to apologize. It's taking people on this journey with you, but being able to show vulnerability when you are afraid, when you're overwhelmed, when you are frustrated. So with being a servant leader, it means to do that. Serve those who you are leading, understanding how they operate individually. If you have a team of 7, you need to get to understand those 7 different people and serve and support them in the ways they need, because not everyone is the same. And then being able to lead by making those hard decisions, having those tough conversations, not shying away from conflict, but then also offering grace and compassion, because everyone is evolving and dealing with the challenges of life every day. So being a servant leader is just that, leading as you should, but then also serving the human nature of the people you have the opportunity to lead.
This is actually going to be a nice companion piece to next week's episode. We're talking to Dr. Lena Haji about how service can be a method of self-love. It can be an act of self-love where if you're lost, you're floundering, you can't really find yourself, that maybe volunteering somewhere, helping out other places, being a servant leader where you may in fact spark, self-love, self-care in some way, shape, or form, which is interesting because we often think about you can't pour from an empty cup, but maybe it's that act of service that actually fills one's cup. And I imagine that your role as servant leader is also why you're looking forward to being a connector in the second half of life too. So what is it about connecting with people that fills your energy?
So I agree with you regarding what's coming next week, as far as you can't pour from an empty cup and you're inspired by giving to others. As wonderful as we are as individuals, and we are all special in our own right, sometimes we have to get over ourselves by understanding that this thing called life is much bigger than me, than you. And oftentimes we have to go and be able to provide some type of support, sitting with someone in various capacities. And that allows us to take our mind off of this problem that may be monumental, but really focus your identity or your state of being on actually serving someone else. And with doing that, it allows you to connect others to themselves, because you're able to pour into someone, allow them to understand what they're going through. They can get through it because you may have a story to tell them as to how you got through something. In addition to that, you can connect other people to other organizations, other resources. With me being a connector, I'm working on a nonprofit. And this nonprofit is going to connect people to resources and supports and adult respite. And we all are, some people say 6 degrees of separation from people. Sometimes I think it's smaller than that. And so with understanding that we can help people get the supports that they may need, that I may not have the knowledge or education at this point, but I know someone who does. So connecting people with other people is a beautiful thing, of being a conduit of change, of connecting someone that can help someone's dream come true, or save their life, or remind them as they're on their healing journey that they're not alone. So being a connector is something I aspire to be, or continue to be, because other people were connectors for me.
That's been the beautiful byproduct of this podcast, is that I've got to connect with all sorts of people in my life that I never, ever in a million years thought that I would be able to connect with, like you. And it really just goes back to when we talk about your network equals your net worth, because like you said, maybe you don't have all the answers, maybe you don't have the experience, but through those connections, through that network, you can get somebody to a resource, and then that resource is always grateful for that referral. I like this idea of helping each other out, building each other up, and considering the extensive work you do in education. I left education and you're still getting after it in there, and I'm eternally grateful that you're still putting in that work and making connections with teachers and making connections with students. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk to Dr. Walker about this idea of resilience, how it impacts us, how we can use it in order to navigate the challenges in life, how we can use it with our children, how we can use it with our students. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. This episode of the Mindful Midlife Crisis is sponsored by Newsly. Newsly is an all-in-one audio super app for iOS and Android. It picks up the most trending articles on the web about topics you choose at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural voice, not a computer voice. The entire web becomes listenable for the first time, all in one place. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, tech, business, science, Bitcoin, mindfulness, midlife crises. paddleboarding, Pearl Jam, they've got it all. Newsly will find you the latest articles and read them to you aloud. You're getting older. Save your eyeballs while still working your brain. Newsly also has podcasts like this one. You can explore trending podcasts from over 80 countries. They even have digital radio so you can stay up to date on your favorite 90s jams so you can rock out with Brian on the bass at the next Gen X Jukebox show. So if that sounds good to you, you can download the app on your phone or visit www.newsly.me. That's www.newsly.me. We'll also link that in the show notes so you can start using Newsly for free. All you got to do is download the app and use the promo code Mindful Midlife, and you will get a free 1-month premium subscription. Again, that's promo code Mindful Midlife for a free 1-month premium subscription. Stop scrolling, start listening with Newsly. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with Dr. Shree Walker. You can go to www.resilientwalker.com and check out what she has there. She has speaking engagements. She has a book there called Resilient Walker that you can pick up. It's even got an audio version of it for those of you who like to multitask. So go ahead, check that out, give it a listen. We're going to talk today about this idea of resilience and how it impacts trauma, how it impacts adversity. And I think that's a good place to start here because I feel like people use the word trauma when they mean adversity. Trauma is kind of it may be an overused word. And I kind of wanted to dive into that. So what do we get wrong about adversity and trauma? And in what ways is adversity different from trauma?
So I think I agree with you that the word trauma, adversity, crises are overused.
Except when you're talking about midlife crises, right? You know, they like this. We're using it correctly, right?
Yes, so you get the right to go and buy the Corvette, right? Yes. Yes. I agree. So trauma is an outcome of an adverse experience. And adversity is something that's unfavorable, something that it's unfavorable. It's not the desired choice. It's not the desired situation. It's something that you, in some cases, can laugh at yourself. It's something that may not have anything to do with your control. It can lead to a traumatic experience. It can be traumatic, but I think there are different levels of adversity, i.e., you're almost about to run out of gas, and you need to borrow some money from someone. That's a hardship, but you have access to get the money from that particular person. You may be late. Adversity may be you're on your way to work, you spill something on your blouse, you have to turn back around. Adversity may be your tire on your bike, has a flat, and so you have to go to the bike shop, so different things can happen that are adverse or unfavorable, and they may have a negative impact. But when it's a traumatic, it messes with your psychological state of being. It is a forever learning process because it altered your understanding, your brain, your body. So I believe we have to understand that there are adverse experiences that are traumatic, but when it's adversity, we need to take a deeper dive to understand to what degree. And although it may be a bike, it still may be something that's a hardship for me, and let's not minimize it.
What's the issue of going to the top shelf word? You know what I mean? Like, what's the issue with people if they go to trauma when it's really adversity? Does it diminish what trauma is then? Because I feel like we're so limited in language now that if we don't go to the top shelf word, then we don't get the attention that we so desire. Does that make sense?
It makes sure, and that's exactly it. I'm going to use the top shelf word because I want you to stop and listen to me. I need the attention. And in my mind, this has totally changed my life forever. I'm going to be late. It's the end of the world. And so sometimes people are dramatic, and or they don't have the language or the ability to process through, this is not that big of a deal, or you know what, it is a big deal, but there still is a solution at this time, and the solution will solve the problem within 24 hours opposed to 2 hours or within 72 hours. So I need you to believe me and understand that me being late and spilling coffee on my blouse is the end of the world. Oftentimes people are thinking bigger than just spilling the coffee on my blouse and have to go back to work. They're not telling you that. But what in actuality has occurred, I've been late for the last 2.5 months. My supervisor already told me that if I'm late again, they're docking my pay. I'm going to have a write-up. But all I'm telling you is, oh my God, it's the end of the world. I didn't give you all the other pieces. So we don't truly offer a wider scope of understanding of a situation. And so, because we don't want to explain and we don't want to be vulnerable, so we just say, oh my God, it's the end of the world. This is so traumatic. And it's like, well, what does that really mean? Let's talk through it. And people don't want to be put on the spot like that. So it's like, I'll just say a word and let you fill in the blanks as to what it means to you.
Well, and it sounds like adversity can be external, just the environment. And we're going to talk about the role environment plays in adversity and trauma here in a little bit too. And the internal adversity feels like maybe a lack of social emotional intelligence, which we'll talk a little bit about too. What is this idea that you have about direct adversity and indirect adversity? What are the difference between these two?
So it's just that what we just discussed in the sense of indirect, it's one of those things, I spill coffee on my blouse, I got to go back home. You at work are now having to go and have this meeting for me that you weren't prepared for, i.e. I had to give you money that I wasn't prepared to lend you, i.e. you are dealing with this adverse experience of breaking your arm or being attacked or being scared, not attacked, but being scared because of a neighbor. And now I have to come and sit with you and help you unpack that information. So indirectly, I'm impacted because I'm your friend, because I'm your father, because I'm your teacher, because so there's a indirect impact of this adversity because I'm pouring into you. I have to listen to it. And then direct is I actually experienced it. And now I have to understand it, classify it, and then share it with others who may be triggered, who may be triggered because they had a shared experience. Oftentimes, I have to be mindful that when I'm talking to students who are, or parents who child is being evaluated for special education, sometimes they're playing out their own childhood insecurities because they were placed or evaluated for special education and they didn't want that for their child. So now this child is being indirectly impacted because of this parent's past experiences. And we do it all the time. And that goes back to understanding who you're dealing with and how we all have experienced adversity in some capacity and then also have had some type of traumatic experience, indirectly impacted or directly impacted.
So most of this can be addressed through resilience. And what I'm wondering is, what are the secret ingredients within one's own emotional intelligence that help us build resilience? And what are the characteristics and environmental factors that play into building resilience?
So that is a loaded question, right? That's loaded. So you heard all of my accolades, all of those accolades. Great, right? But I had to learn outside accomplishments don't fix inside hurt. Right? With that, I was abused by my stepfather at 5, a female neighbor at 10, inappropriately touched by my grandfather at 16, raped at 19. I used to have Bell's palsy on the left side of my face, so my face was partially paralyzed. Born to a teenage mother. Before she was 18, she had given birth to 3 children. By the time she was 30, there were 6 of us. There was a lot of adversity, traumatic experiences, dealing with low self-esteem, questioning my worth, grew up in the Jordan Project in Watts. So all of these adverse experiences, traumatic experiences, poverty were shaped, right? They shaped my mind. The body keeps the score, so I'm having to figure those things out. So for me, being in that environment, there were some factors. There was some intrinsic motivation. There was some external motivation. There was this idea of the possibilities. And there was some external support and sometimes internal support. And what I mean by that is, to be resilient, there has to be, in most cases, an intrinsic motivation, this desire to change and not accept your reality. And in some cases, people are motivated intrinsically, but that voice is very small. So they need external factors such as a television show or seeing this teacher or hearing someone else's story who got through the abuse or got through the low self-esteem or suicidal thoughts. And so we have to make sure we are sharing our stories. In addition to that, people have to have permission to feel. So we have intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, permission to feel, be allowed to make mistakes and process. Because oftentimes people want to say, well, just get over it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get after it. And it's true. You do need to have this, let's go, let's get it done. But during that, you have to be able to unpack. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I do want to give up. I don't have anything else to give. But framing it around in this moment. This moment may last for 2 hours. This moment may last for a week, but we are ever evolving. So we have to make sure we understand that people are motivated, but that's where the discipline comes in. You have to be disciplined and understand your why. Is your why to be a supermodel? Is your why to lose weight, to be healthy? Is your why to save the world? Is your why? So you have to understand your why as well. So we have intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, being disciplined, understanding your why, and believing in the possibilities.
I'm glad you brought up the bootstraps community, because I feel like the bootstraps community oftentimes will find people to prop up who have faced indirect adversity yet have found success, so that they can, maybe in a sense, victim blame others. And so what do we get wrong about resilience then?
It's people hear my story and they're like, well, she did it. You can do it. Why are you complaining that you weren't really sexually assaulted? Someone just grabbed you in an alley and you got away. So why are you still traumatized by that? So we compare people to each other's or traumas to each other, and we shouldn't do that, because the way you experience something, the way you feel something is totally different from the way I experience something. So we need to hold space for others, even if they're going to the top shelf and calling it something, but helping them unpack it. But then we also need to give them the opportunity to execute what they've learned through the process, and understanding that to be resilient, it is a variety of things to do to help you through. So it could be going to school. It could be exercising. It could be medication. It could be counseling. It could be sitting out and staring at the window, opposed to just saying, get over it already. Get over it already. We don't understand the impact that something is going to have on someone, that the impact on you may be totally different. So let's not compare how you got through something to how someone else may get through something. So grief may take time. Overcoming adversity from passing a test may take time. So we got to understand that everyone is not the same. And it doesn't mean that you're not resilient because you took a nap or you just need to rest. That's a part of being resilient, figuring out what you need and doing that. Does that make sense?
It does. It brings up a question that popped into my mind here as you were explaining this. They can actually identify athletic ability in children at a very young age, like 1-2 years old. And they believe that there's a genetic predisposition to that. And yes, obviously they have to continue to work to continue being an elite athlete, that kind of thing. But, they've shown that elite athletes a lot of times are born with a lot of athleticism, and then they have this knack for being an athlete. And so that's kind of what they gravitate towards. Do you think that people are born with more social emotional skills, more resilience than other people? I don't even know what an answer to that would be, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
I think, in my opinion, I think it's an argument, right? That's probably out there that people are born this way. And I would agree with that, but I also agree with what you said, that you can cultivate, you can learn a skill. And so there may be people who, like me, are intrinsically motivated. I'm going to do it no matter what. And there are others when, and this goes back to the nature versus nurture, put in a certain environment, will rise to the occasion, and it may take them failure after failure after failure, but this is the environment and this is how we behave. And so they understand that. So I think it's a combination of what is in you. If I want to be a singer, I can't sing. Can I hold a note? Sometimes. But if this is something I want to do and I am putting in those magical 10,000 hours, I'm sure I will be a much better singer than I am today, 5 years from now, And same thing with being motivated or having discipline or being resilient. It's each time you're having to deal with the adversity or traumatic experience or being in crises, it's how do you respond to it? It has happened to you. What happens in your emotional brain and your thinking brain? How are you able to process through it so you can continue throughout life? And so that's where we have the disparities, because most people don't have access to the resource and the education to unpack the trauma or adverse childhood experiences and the impact like some other people do.
So then what are some actionable steps that people can take in order to build their resiliency?
Being disciplined, giving yourself permission to feel, having community, people who have a not only shared vision or shared mindset, but some that are going to challenge your mindset so you can actually become an effective communicator, seeking to understand what's going on with you. So it's a combination of self-discovery. In addition to that, seek out help, counseling, support groups. In addition to that, exercising. Medication may help you through your adversity. So figuring out what works for you, that may sound all over the place, because it is. Each person is his or her own individual, and you have to self-assess and figure out what's going to work for you and how you're going to respond. So getting to know yourself, discovering yourself, what makes you tick? Why am I impacted by this? Why do I get upset when this happens? What is your pattern? And so it is a journey with yourself, and then finding that education around what's happening to you, what has happened to you, and your desires, and then creating a plan and then executing that plan. And when there's a failure or a setback, repeating those steps all over again. It's not a take 2 of these and try them in the morning and you're done. It's you are a forever learner. You're forever self-discovering. I'm not the same person I was 10 years yesterday, let alone 10 years ago, And so we have to give ourselves permission to feel and grace and understand that we are forever learners and apply it to ourselves.
Well, and it reminds me of 2 conversations that I had, episode 30 with Scott Welly, where he talks about the difference between discipline and motivation, because motivation is fleeting. Discipline is instilled in you, and it's something that you have to commit to, and you have to be consistent with it. Like, success doesn't exist without discipline plus consistency. And then an episode that we have coming up later, we talked to Jason Robinson about the experiment mindset, where he's been a digital nomad for quite a while, but he had to piece that together, especially because he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes right before he started his big journey overseas. So he had to experiment with how to navigate those challenges in his life. And it sounds like that's what you're suggesting here is, hey, you got to figure out what works for you. But then when you do, When you find it, and it might take some time, you need to be disciplined with it, or you might not see the results right away. You have to continually go for it. So let's do this. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Dr. Walker about this idea of resilience when we are talking about diverse learners. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. New episodes come out every Wednesday to help you get over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact me, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like to hear on the show, visit www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com and click Contact Us. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. You can also click on the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. If you want to check out my worldly adventures, follow me on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. My hope is that my trials, tribulations, and successes will inspire you to take intentional action to live a more purpose-filled life. And while you're at it, remember to show yourself some love every now and then, too. Thanks again. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here talking to Dr. Shree Walker. You can go check out what she has to offer at www.resilientwalker.com. You can purchase her book, Resilient Walker, at her website. Click on the show notes to get that access as well. It's an audio book, so go check that out. I love me a good audio book because if I'm going to go for a walk, then I can just take in the book while I take in nature. It's just a nice way to do that. I'm so glad that you do an audio version of your book.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the hardest things I've ever done.
Did you read it?
I did. And I have dyslexia. And so with reading the book and reliving the experiences, it was challenging, but so cathartic. And for anyone who is actually narrating their own story, I commend you. I salute you because that was one of the hardest things I've done in life.
Well, let's talk about that writing process and that sharing process. What was that? You've talked about how it was cathartic. When you look back on your experience, how do you connect that to the experiences of others and helping them get through that trauma?
So the way the book is actually written, because of dyslexia and processing delays, I jotted down some notes and things like that, but I recorded the book, pretty much dictation, and then had it transcribed. And I worked with an editor and things of that nature. But the book is that it is the invisible side of me. It's my stories, my experiences, and my thoughts about those experiences and the impact of those experiences. And people often ask me, who is my demographic? Is it Black women? Is it abused women? Is it Christian women or men? What's the demographic? The demographic is the human spirit. People as young as 15 have read my book, as old as 80, 90 years old, all walks of life have read my book and have been able to connect with the joys and the pain and the stories because I'm talking about the experiences of life and how sometimes they make us go, they make us hold our breath, and at the same time, they make us cheer. And I was able to share my story through discussing voices, our internal voices, external voices, the impact of that, the am I enough, the am I too much, relationships, my relationships with fathers, friends, mother, trauma, my traumatic experiences, and then also my core beliefs. And so, with doing that, it gives you a true understanding of how life is forever evolving and it is an experience. So, I was able to connect with the reader that way for him or her to process it in her own understanding because I'm talking about this shared understanding of pain, this shared understanding of joy. But what may bring me joy may not be the same thing that brings you joy, but you understand when I say joy and you're thinking about your own experiences. So people were able to really connect because I'm giving them permission to feel and letting them know that it's going to be okay. And it's okay to express yourself when you are frustrated, when you're down, but then also celebrate yourself when it's time to celebrate.
How did your trauma shape your core experiences? And is it different from how your resilience shaped your core experiences, or are they not mutually exclusive?
I don't think they're exclusive. I think they are. We're like a tapestry, right? Like we have this beautiful tapestry that has the beautiful colors and things like that. But then also sometimes some parts have dark colors and gaping holes. And so because of my trauma, because of the world that I grew up in, I talk about society often thinks people are products of their environment. I believe we're all products of our environment. Our environment shape us, where you have a parent who is an alcoholic, two kids. One says, I'm an alcoholic because my dad was an alcoholic. The other one, I don't drink because my dad used to drink. And so we are all products of our environment, but I think society uses that in a negative connotation in the sense of, oh, she's not smart enough because her family wasn't smart enough, which may be true, but now you have knowledge of that. How do we help give them supports to bridge the gap? And so I believe my environment, being from Watts in this place that was hard, but people continue to get up and show up every day with nothing, impoverished, that molded me in the sense of I still get up and I go every day. I get out my feelings. In some cases, when I don't feel like doing something, I'm still motivated and have the discipline enough to continue to move on. So I think it's a combination of both, of my core belief, my intrinsic motivation, but also considering these things that happened to me. And although they could have made me hard and callous, and in some part of my life, there were moments where I was hard and callous, but in other moments, it was a matter of now we need to heal this. Now we need to work through this. And what does that look like?
So you talk about in some of your keynote addresses that we are products of our environment, therefore ensuring educational stability, minimizing disruptions, and creating endless opportunities and possibilities for diverse learners is in crisis is imperative. So
Yes.
how do we do that? What are suggestions that you have? I mean, that's a tall order. So how do we do it from within, and when we take a look at big picture, how do we do that?
So first we have to seek to understand, right? And that tall order is for everyone, not just the kids who are impoverished, not just the kids who are marginalized. That tall order is for everyone, the affluent, people who are refugees. When I say diverse learners, I'm talking about everyone. It doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your background, how you got to America, or which school you go to, private, charter, your language, your understanding. We are all diverse learners in some capacity. So I'm talking about everyone. And in the educational realm, to do that tall order, you have to consider or seek to understand the students that you're engaging with. So you take an affluent population, gifted students, although they're product of their environments and their parents may be politicians and doctors and lawyers, and they don't have money issues, right? Money solves money problems, right? But then they still have emotional support that they need. They still need to be able to have permission to feel, and probably are masking things with money. And so it goes back to seeking to understand what that particular student or counterpart or colleague may need, and understanding how to give them those supports so you can have the educational stability, because they may show up but may be checked out. They may show up or feel like they're not seeing. They may show up but not rising to the level of their actual abilities. And same thing for the marginalized people, same thing, seeking to understand, but also understanding that just because they may not have the financial resources doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity, or how they may be expressing their knowledge and skills may manifest in a different way and not on a test score, through a test score. So we have to definitely seek to understand who we are dealing with, what's actually needed, and understand that there's a solution to every one of those problems. We're going to have some barriers, but then let's assess those solutions and barriers and then execute, because we have money, we have resources, but what are we using it for? How are we using the resources? And through that whole process, not judge those people that we're actually serving. And I like to say it better. I think Tupac said this: don't judge people for their choices when you don't know their options. And so when we do that and actually show up and serve people, we can actually create these endless possibilities because we are looking at them as an individual and not comparing them to this category of people and supports.
It's interesting that as you're talking about this, it reminds me so much of my experiences from traveling this past year that particularly in the United States and I think even in the United Kingdom too, there is a me first mentality, whereas a lot of the other places that I have visited is a we first mentality. So, i- how do we move towards that? Because I think, and it goes back to this idea of you can't pour from an empty cup, but then you were talking about hey, acts of service might actually fill your cup. So how do we have conversations with people who are like, well, that's not my problem. That's not my responsibility. Like I've never been married. I don't have kids. Yet I still think I need to invest in the youth of America. I think that education is important. That's why I committed to it for 21 years of my life. And even though I'm not in education anymore, I still think that education is important. Like, I hope that there are teenagers that listen to this podcast and listen to conversations that I have with you and other people so that they take something away from this and apply it for the greater good. So, how do we have those conversations with people on a grander scale?
Well, I commend you because you get it. I mean, you get it that although you don't have children, you've never been married, you are a part of a community, right? Your local community, your state community, the country community, global community. And you're able to say, you know what, although I don't have children, I understand that the children of today is the future of tomorrow, and they are going to be creating laws and making laws and things like that. So you get it. I think others have to understand that it is a mutualistic relationship. It's very reciprocal in the event of we're pouring into each other. And so then that means my cup is never empty if there is this mutualistic exchange opposed to this parasitic, like nature of you're going to give me all you got. You're going to give me all you got. And it's like, that's not how this is supposed to work. And so in the education world, you have parents who feel as if they're not being heard, systems in place that may not speak to their needs. You have teachers who feel like they're not being heard, systems in place that seem like they're very top down. And so we have to make sure we're having these tough conversations, but then also considering the weight of your contribution as a stakeholder in various capacities. You're a stakeholder in the community, although you're not an educator. I'm a stakeholder in the community that I'm going out and I'm pouring into the people. Someone else may be a stakeholder as a parent, a psychologist. And so we have to really consider the weight of our contribution. And if you're not changing the system to improve the system for all, then you need to get out the way and understand that you're going to help support the system other way by donating time, by donating to a charity or volunteering somewhere, but you're not going to be at the table making the system even more convoluted than it already is, because many would say, and I don't know who said this, the system isn't broken, it was built this way. And so if we start with that most people feel that the system was built this way to be divisive, then consider the weight of your contribution. It goes back to the self-assessing. Change starts with me. Mindset shift. What do I really believe about myself and the people I'm serving in various capacities, from the aides, from the paraprofessionals, to the students, to the marginalized, to the affluent? What do I really believe about these people? What do I need to learn about systems? Let me evaluate the systems. And then how do we execute this action plan that we created? So it's the same process in different worlds, right? You're doing this assessment. You're constantly assessing, and then you make the change. And when something isn't working, after you give it some time, you're able to pivot and have that conversation. Most people don't want to say, you know what, we've tried this for 6 or 7 weeks. What's working, what's not working? Let's make some adjustments. And so we have to make sure we're able to do that to change this mindset from that the system is broken, is not broken, it was built this way, to we are the system and we get to create the world we want to see. And if it's not working, you're not at fault, I'm at fault. And if we say that, I am at fault and I am showing up and this is my contribution, and we work collaboratively. And I know people are like, well, that's in theory and that's idealistic, but it works. But it works. And if you don't believe it works, prove me wrong. And I bet you in about 6 to 9 months, it's like, wait a minute, this is actually working. So we have to really consider the weight of our contribution.
I think the hard part is when your idealism clashes with somebody else's idealism. And then, we get stuck in the bog and I go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so that's great. Let's sit down and let's have that conversation. Let's do some thought mapping, your ideas and my idea. And it's not a matter of scaling down. Let's do this in phases. Let's do this in phases. We can have all the ideas, but let's do this in phases. But let's have a matrix or process to where we're really vetting what we're talking about, and let's put egos to the side. And even if you may be considered difficult, right? We still want diversified thought, but say what you need to say in the room, in the meeting. So when we leave out of this room, the 10 to 15 leaders, we've laid it all out and we're not having these meetings after the fact and discussing all the things we should have said in the room. It goes back to vulnerability. It goes back to putting your ego to the side. And it goes back to, we can solve this problem. And it's not a matter, we can't do what you want to do. Let's process through what you're discussing and phase it in or do it in stages. So that goes back to ego, and then understanding what's at the center of this. We are talking about students and families and the human spirit. And so when that is our focal point, what you will end up getting is, I believe, people then complaining about, oh, this is too much. Because now there's accountability process. In years past, it was confusion. There was mixed messaging. So there was no accountability. And we can continue to just go around and around and around in circles. But if you were at the table and you had a voice and either didn't use your voice, or you actually helped build this system, and now we put it out there, it's not working, you don't want to be at fault. And most people don't want to be held accountable. It's just easy to complain and point the finger. Or have these side chatter meetings behind the principal's back or the parents' back or, your colleagues' back, opposed to, okay, here's the problem. Here are the barriers. Here are the challenges. Here's the desired outcome. Here's a possible solution. How do we get to this desired outcome that we know is possible?
That makes me think that I need to have someone on here to talk about clear communication, because being Minnesotan, we love passive aggressiveness. We love passive aggressive. We just, so I think that would be key to have someone on to talk about this idea of clear communication, because you're absolutely right. Like when we're having these sidebar meetings, what's really being accomplished outside of my sidebar, agenda over
Mm-hmm.
here? I wanted to go back to, as we develop resilience within diverse learners, what's the fine line between cultivating high expectations, lacking cultural awareness that leads to bias, and having good intentions but low expectations?
Belief. It all goes back to, what do you really believe about me? Because when you see me as a student, a colleague, a leader, either you heard something about me from another colleague, if you're in the principal capacity and I'm new to this job, and you tell your coworker, man, she's terrible. She doesn't follow through. She's an idealist. She lives in her head. That's your belief about me. And so as you're encountering me, that's what you expect. If you get a new student in your classroom that's a part of a family where the parents are litigious or considered difficult, that's your belief about that parent. Or if you have siblings in your class that are receive special education services and a previous teacher tells you, well, he can't read, or girl, you should be happy that he just showed up today. That's your actual understanding, and you have the choice to believe it or have your own set of beliefs. So it starts back to, what do you actually believe about the human spirit and the people you are connected to? And you have to go back to self-assessing. What do you believe about Black folks, Black boys, Black girls, immigrants? What do you believe about kids with two moms or two dads? What do you believe about transgender students? And I would cause you to pause before you say things like, I don't understand, or it doesn't make sense. You should really say, how blessed am I to not have to understand, number one. And then number two, understand your belief system, because what you believe is going to manifest in the content you teach, how you lead people as a leader, how you encounter people in the community. So you have to really self-assess and understand your belief system. This is one of those things where we have to, in the words of Michael Jackson, as you can see, I'm making a couple music references. I like music.
I enjoy it. You've hit me with Tupac, you hit me with Michael Jackson, like all my faves when I was a kid. So
Yes, you have to start with the man in the mirror. Like, you really have to start with the man in the mirror, because when, as a teacher, you're in the classroom, are you really creating lessons, talking about theory and talking about civil disobedience? Are you talking about David Henry Thoreau? Are you talking about philosophers or not? Because you don't believe these kids can understand it. Are you really asking kids about their papers because their parents came to the country, in a way that wasn't the traditional way? Are we really concerned about that? Or are you understanding that you get to impress upon the subconscious mind of this child, regardless of how he or she came to be? You have a responsibility. And so we have to really understand that. And it starts with self-assessing. So belief is the most important thing. And then once you believe, then your actions will dictate your belief system. And then we get into relationships. And how you communicate me, understanding that I may be this parent from the quote unquote hood, and I may be in the classroom coming to meet with you and I'm clacking my fingers and I got my rollers in my hair and I'm upset, and I may be coined the angry Black woman. So you find me difficult, and not everyone is showing up to the meeting, but this parent over here who is married to a doctor or a lawyer, and she's a doctor or a lawyer, and is threatening to call the legal team, or News Channel 5 or whatever. We're dancing around 50 people at a meeting. I'm exaggerating, but all these people at a meeting, and we are accommodating this parent. We're not calling this parent difficult. But this other parent who is utilizing the resources and communicating the best way he or she knows how, we dismiss it, and we have these drive-by meetings, or we have a lack of respect, because we're uncomfortable. So it goes back to self-assessing, expectations, putting things into practice, and then building those relationships.
So let me play devil's advocate just a little bit. Is unconscious bias stronger than belief? Because if you're a well-meaning teacher who believes all students can learn, but your unconscious bias suggests otherwise, it feels like that's stronger than belief. Or again, are they not mutually exclusive?
I believe unconscious biases is stronger than belief because it's automatic. When I do a presentation, we talk about apples. We're talking about these apples, and think of an apple, and I'm asking people to think of an apple, and then I'll ask, what color apple did you think of? And what color apple did you think of? And the room, people are raising their hands and they're talking about red and why they chose red, and green and why they chose green, gold and why they chose. And they are starting to think, I did that unconsciously, subconsciously. And it's because of their grandmother. It's because of the apple pie. It's because of all of this information that is, or that manifests with this program that we're running in our heads, because that's what we do every day. We run this program over and over and over and over and over again. And it's truly, what do I know versus what do I believe? Someone can know that they're beautiful, but do you really believe you're beautiful? Someone can know that they're smart, but do you really believe that you're smart? So that's where that fear comes in of not wanting to execute or try out, or I know I'm thin, but I really don't believe it. So now I'm anorexic. So same thing. I know all kids can learn, but now I have these Black boys in my classroom and I'm actually afraid of them because all of the things I see on television about kids in an alternative school, and I understand that they are really low. So I don't believe that they can learn. So we're going to give them worksheets when they need clear direction, they need affirmation, they need a lot of different things, but your belief is this is as far as they can go because subconsciously society has told you this. Subconsciously, when you reading the documents, it's like, well, it's got to be true, not knowing or really understanding that you are the change to help them grow. And we're not saying leaps and bounds overnight, but giving them the skills and supports that they need. So the subconscious mind, how long does it take us to judge someone? It's less than a millisecond. A millisecond to judge someone, and you're going to be with someone for 9 months to 5 or 6 years. And television doesn't help. We often live in neighborhoods with people who look like us. So then that validates some other things. We're not engaging with other people differences, depending on your political reviews, that may impact it as well. And so as a teacher, you are really having to, in some cases, believe one thing, but cultivate and facilitate this learning that's this elusive a system, so to speak, or practices. And that may be very hard for some teachers, because how do you really deal with a kid who has 2 moms and 2 dads, and that's so not what you believe? And now you're getting ready to have this meeting with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Jones, and you think this is so taboo. How long are you going to sustain? And I'm not saying you may be nasty towards the parents or curt, but it may make you uncomfortable. It may make you question the kid or go with your other friends and have these conversations that are not appropriate. So I believe subconscious is very strong, and it's going to manifest itself. And people like me, or people who have high nonverbal IQs, we listen with our eyes. We listen with our eyes because body language, right, behavior is the true testament of what you're actually saying. We get so much mixed messaging all the time. I really don't care what's coming out of your mouth. Are you going to show up? I really don't care what you're saying. Are you going to show up? When you say you love all people, and then I'm watching that millisecond afterwards and you roll your eyes. You say you appreciate your colleague, Mr. Johnson, and as soon as he walks out the room, I'm watching how you like, when a kid comes in that you as an educator, you dread this child coming to class every day because he causes so much disruption. The other kids are watching you, and as soon as he walks in, you give this sigh. The kids are watching that. So the subconscious, how you really feel, how you hold your hands, how you cross yourself, it's going to come up. So you need to be able to check it, right, wrong, or indifferent. So I'm not saying you can't educate kids who don't look like you. I'm not saying you can't educate kids who come from different neighborhoods. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is make yourself self-aware of who you are and how your behavior and expectations may manifest themselves when engaging with kids who are diverse in every aspect of the word. So you could have a white child who's affluent, and you too was a white child who was affluent, but this person is dealing with anxiety. How do you cultivate that? This kid may not have an IEP, but has a 504, right? How do you help support opposed to saying, well, he's gifted, he doesn't need a 504. He still is having issues with concentration. And we took the time to collect the data to support that, opposed to, he'll be all right. He comes from money, he'll be all right. And it's like, no. Am I making sense?
You have made so much sense, and you have given me so many mic drop moments here throughout this conversation, and it makes me want to continue being a forever learner. So, Dr. Walker, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experiences with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. As I reflect back over my life as being this kid from Watts, right? Less than 1% of the United States population have a doctorate. Less than that are female. Less than that are Black. Less than that have the number 7 on the ACEs score, the adverse childhood experiences, right? So it's like, what a joy it is to let my voice be heard, not only because of my education, but because of my lived experiences. So I am very grateful for this opportunity to impact the human spirit. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and you just reminded me that I wanted to talk ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, with you. But the good news is that is just an excuse to bring you back on the show so that we can have that conversation. So I'm looking forward to round 2 with you, Dr. Walker.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you. If you want more from Dr. Shree Walker, you can go to www.resilientwalker.com. You can pick up her book, Resilient Walker, at her website as well. For Dr. Walker, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.